The period in time between the Ice Age. The period in time between the Ice Age, the last or fourth Ice Age, if you're writing down numbers, is 24,000 BC to 8,000 BC. 16,000 year period. That's the marker between the original people who were first evolved through creation from the trees, the plants, the other animals by the combination of genetic materials sent to Earth from outside the solar system. Over the millions of years, the evolution is basically a chance of all the parts under the right conditions coming together and in fact creating a new version of trees or a new version of animals. For example, the dinosaur and then a new version of animal, like the human. Once the lesson is taught that dinosaurs may be the biggest animal in the world, but also the dumbest, they're not needed for the purpose that the system had in mind of creating a mind that walks and is in motion. Some material arrives by comet, which causes the destruction of the existing race of animals, and others lay down the foundation for the genetics needed for smaller and smarter animals called humans. Over the period of approximately 130,000 BC to 80,000 BC, about 50,000 years, humans lived as they were made. Unfortunately, for most of them, what ended up becoming males were in one place and females in another, separated by the Mediterranean Sea and the mountains of Europe. It wasn't until about 80,000 BC where they came together. When they came together and had sexual relations, they began to understand the process through which genetic engineering could evolve. Evolution basically means taking the intended process of creation and transferring it to a group of people who claim the right of creation and call themselves God, which is linked to the word dog backwards. Dogs and bitches. They worked out the process between 80,000 BC to 60,000 BC, making babies and understanding what was happening and what role the male played and what role the female played. The babies born that were male went with the Neanderthals, and the babies born that were female went with the women who were later called Amazons from North Africa. Until they fought, they were learning, but as they learned and developed archives, one group and then the other felt that they were the principal partner in the deal, and they didn't need the other one's assistance if they in fact decided to genetically engineer their own. So the males basically sacrificed females to steal their eggs, while the females gathered sperm for the males and put it in some kind of lab. Each one had some of each of the other and went back to doing their own thing for thousands of years. At one stage of the game, the male side Neanderthals lost a large number of people in a landslide called an avalanche. In an avalanche, there is a kind of instant death in minutes, followed by instant freezing, cryogenics. If a person or animal dies in other than freezing conditions, the spot on the ground where they died will change colors. The place you bury them will also change colors, so there seems to be kind of three-step process, because first there's death, second there's immediate loss of life energy absorbed by the grass surrounding and changing its color, and later as the whole body has been consumed, a final loss of life energy changes the color of the grass at the place the body was buried. So there appears to be a three-step process in birthing. One egg, a real egg from a woman, or genetically engineered, which means basically you open it up, take what's in it, and put in what you want instead. The next thing is fertilization of the egg. The third thing is the addition of life force, step by step, which makes a human being. It takes 9 months to develop a fetus from beginning to end. That can only be done if the fertilized egg was in a sac containing a liquid they discovered, which resembles water. Amniotic fluid basically means water that has additions in it. The lesson was taught to the Neanderthal when they would retrieve some of the people that died in the avalanche and put them in a place to melt them down and find out that they basically died again. Later on, somebody had the idea that you had to slow down the thawing process and then put them in a room where they could control the temperature and drop it slowly. They found out that there wasn't much difference from doing it quickly if it was done in a room. Then it was suggested that maybe a transparent vase of some kind that they could look at filled with seawater would in fact bring this thing to life. Salt in any recipe has not only the ability to give you a salty taste, but sodium enhances the flavor of everything else that's been put into the recipe. In all, they make a solution using the sap of trees that bear fruit as a basis instead of straight seawater. They mixed the two of them together and pulled it out, seeing the bubbling or changing colors of the liquid, and then put the fertilized egg in there and see how it interacted with the egg and caused a new birth. There is a suggestion that at one stage of the game the fetus could be taken out, inserted into an animal to be carried to term. This is thought of as a sea cow or a manatee, a whale basically, which is linked to the word male. In any event, they found out that they could reanimate the DNA of one person from the egg and the sperm if it's done properly in a lab. That was the lesson learned in the 18th dynasty Egypt, which was given to them by the people who had developed prior to the Ice Age. The reason for the period of time we're in, 8000 BC to 8000 AD, is a laboratory. The people before the Ice Age used the technology they had to develop to master the race, very well known in secret societies as ascended masters. They in fact passed down the information secretly, known only by two separate groups, male and female. These groups call themselves ecclesiastic Freemasonry and hide behind the scenes to manage everything in this period of time, the 16,000 years, which is the time where you're now at 10,000 years, Akhenaten. So now we've done what we were sent to do. We grew from a few 100,000 people to 7 billion people. We know by the writings of the writers of the 1500s, when the King James Bible was written and the New Atlantis was written, that they consider the period of time from 4000 BC to 2000 AD as this college of 6 days. One day being 1,000 years. So that's where the story of making a woman from Adam's rib. Eve is the woman that was made, which basically tells you this isn't going to be the last version. This is going to be the penultimate version. Over the period of the last 6,000 years, they accomplished everything they were looking for. One thing they were looking for was to be able to test on a large group of people: war, famine, pestilence, and disease. You need a large enough group of people to do it with. You can't be sure of the end result. Now they are. Another thing they've learned is that they can make anything they want in a task-specific world. They can make people who are smart, dumb. They can make people who think they're masters, people who consider themselves destroyers. All of these things are possible. Now the time has come where the information they've gathered has to be assembled, retested without the interference of those who did the original investigations. Most of the original investigations were done in the north. The northern hemisphere contains 6 billion, southern contains 1 billion. From the 6, they go through a process of destruction to eliminate as many as they can, leaving 1 billion in the southern hemisphere, which means South America, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand. That gives you 3 in 1, like 2013. They are waiting there for the opportunity to begin the process of the archives review. For that purpose, the surplus money has been sent from the West and turned into gold, made part of Hindu society, and now being transferred to Brazil. They will have the same task in Brazil as India had during our period here. The journey of the money is symbolized by the movement of the Orange Lodge leading to merging with the nuns, gray, blue, there's all kinds of nuns, but they all have the same purpose, and that's to have God's children. Then place them out into society. A symbol had to be created for this, and it's known in the world as the Holocaust. We are now told that the intent was to destroy the Jewish people by Nazi in Germany. If you know the history of Germany, then you know the people there came from Israel during the diaspora and made the biggest Jewish state in Germany until the late 1800s, early 1900s. So it's like a civil war. They changed religion for the purpose of doing what they had to do, to disguise what they had to do and enhance the memory of why they did it. They begin by gathering gypsies, Roma, assembling them into concentration camps, assembling gays, Freemasons, and finally turning their attention to Jews. The total number is 6 million, coincidental with the 6 days of the college of 6 days. Instead of 6 billion, the first gang is 6 million. It all happened in the period prior to the reanimation of the State of Israel in 1949. 49 being a 13, the same border number as 49th parallel was applied between the United States and Canada. It's all a confirmation of where they sit with their plan at any specific time. Along the way of manufacturing people the way they did, they discovered that the fluid in which the babies were born had an effect on what we call personality, and it's what the medical profession calls humor. It was by trial and error that they tested different fruit trees as a mixture that could be added in the genetic engineering of a fetus. They went through the process of palm trees, coconut, fig trees, and plum trees. Orange seems to be a very helpful fruit, so it was sent from India to China, back to India, distributed all over the world. The latest one to receive from Japan, the orange, traveled all across Europe, North Africa to America, across to Japan, now in Brazil. Brazil is the largest orange distributor. However, they did find by accident in Montreal, Canada, in the water coming from the St. Lawrence, there seemed to be better than fruit juice. In other words, when you make a fruit, you lose some of the quality of the sap. Therefore, what they had discovered 2,000 years before was that there was a tree in Canada, mostly in Quebec, Ontario, some in the northern United States, that made no fruit in the common sense of a peach. The latest one they have been using was the apple, and that's where the story Johnny Appleseed comes from. Apple seeds to create an orchard and a Bible to read. The two of them together will tell you what your true mission in life is, and that's to make babies for God who follow instructions in their DNA. The maple tree is a version of the apple tree, but more female than male. The word apple, of course, starts with ap, which is the word pap. Everybody knows what a pap smear is, and it's all about, in the original sense of the word, was the breast, because the breast feeds, it nurtures. That's why the name Pope at the Vatican is the English version of the French word pap, which comes from Latin. So the mother seed, as opposed to the father seed, is more likely to be closer to what they are looking for. They call Ogdensburg the Maple City. They also have drawn through the layout of their streets a fish as part of their map. So there's a context there of salmon going to spawn, turn red and die. Maple goes home to create leaves and moves sugar. That's why they call them sugar maples. Then at the end of the season, out drops the sap, and leaves turn red when there's been the most sugar, fall off the tree, and wait for another season. In spring, of course, those who make maple syrup will gather up the sap as it's rising on those very cold nights, but sunny in the morning, which causes the sap to rise, and they kind of hijack a portion of it, then filter it. In the filtering of sap, it takes about 1,000 gallons of sap to make 1 gallon of syrup, which makes it strange as to why people go through that much trouble. Much of what is made in the way of maple syrup is put into warehouses. For whatever reason, not much of it gets on the market. Only the darker stuff that has more bark taste ends up on the market. Recently, there's been a hijacking. Somebody broke in and stole thousands of tons of maple from a warehouse in Quebec. I don't know where it's going. I can vouch that it's in some genetic lab. If you go back in time, there's a time in ancient, before the Ice Age, there were a group of people known as the Golden Hordes. They came from the Himalayas, set up in the Caucasus Mountains, had a group of descendants known as Caucasians. They were white, blonde hair, moved into Europe, Scandinavia, Finland, Russia. Finland is a country that has kind of kept immigrants from migrating. That's why they call them Finnish. Therefore, you have a very distinctive genome to Caucasians linked. But if you study the Finns, you'll find out that there are two versions of Caucasians. The second has to be created because the first was too linked into Asian, and they wanted a milder version for what they wanted them to do in America. That's linked to maples.